Is the future of music high resolution, CD quality, or compressed? So let's kick off with David on this.
I think we'd all love to say it's high res, but I think it's actually all three. For dCS, we are format agnostic. You give us the data, and we try and act like a piece of glass. We let you see into the recording. That's our kind of raison d'etre, is we shouldn't exist. Now, I think there's a huge part of the music-loving population that have never heard anything other than MP3 or compressed, and I think that's the challenge of us all here, is how do we get well-recorded music, fantastic user interfaces and ways of discovering your music and managing it in front of more people, and the more people that hear just how good the music can sound, then the better for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were just talking before about how I always say to people it's weird that MP3s and what's happened with music quality, it's the only kind of industry or medium I can think of where the technology that most people are using has got worse. Like you think about screen resolution, obviously that's just on a continued upward trajectory. Everything in the world pretty much, unless there's something vintage which is, better made or better crafted or whatever, there's no, the reason for MP3 and low format compressed music to exist is dying all the time as bandwidth gets better and storage space gets cheaper. So I think the last sort of 10, 15, whatever years are going to be a real blip. We're going to look back on it in 20 years and be like, that was really weird how it all just got sort of crappy for a while. So I think it is ultimately the future. It will just happen. It will just get to that point. And I guess it will sort of be implemented from the top down. So, people want to offer the best service possible. So, why would you not want all the data and information in the music? You're obviously going to want to offer that. And I think as soon as, as streaming services realise there is an incentive where it is an upsell where, some people are willing to pay for it, it will sort of filter down and, eventually it's just going to become the norm when everyone's got super fast internet connections. So, yeah, I think it's inevitable, which is great.
Okay. Enno. Okay.
Following on from that, what you say makes sense to me, but it doesn't seem to make sense to the streaming services. There's plenty of, on the video side of things, there's plenty of services that let you stream HD and 4K video. I mean, that's taken off pretty quickly, and you need to downside more bandwidth than high-res audio, but it doesn't seem to be happening.
So I would say it's exactly what I was just saying. People have expected screen technology, to continuously improve because it's everyone can kind of tell. Obviously, the problem with audio is that, a lot of people aren't going to be able to tell the difference between a 320 kilobytes per second MP3 and a WAV. But the fact that we've become used to the norm being sold worse sound quality for convenience's sake, that means that the sort of motivation, the streaming providers can't see that the desire is there because people have been given this step down. So I think, the parallel with visuals, it's just because that's what people have come to expect. There was no period when, I guess you could draw a parallel in the early days of the internet when, visuals were poor quality because of bandwidth. But I think it's a combination of that and just that it's a lot easier for more people to see when something is a high definition video. And also, it's happening with televisions as well, not just, videos online. So, but it's an interesting point.
Gentleman there.
It's not necessarily the case that it's the streaming companies that are limiting the resolution of what they send. It's actually the record companies. I subscribe to Crowbus, Sublime Plus. That means I get streaming 24/192 max. If you go into Crowbus, look at all the new releases, you will see high-res available. You go to the high-res, and you will find, the high-res is available for your download, but for streaming it's not available because the record company is saying, no, we don't want people to get high-res for streaming, we still need something to sell.
Actually, that's actually not the reason that happens. What's interesting is that, and I think one of the reasons that companies like Spotify stick with 320K lossy encoding is that they have bandwidth costs, right? So the labels charge, I'll do the quick 101 of the economics of this. The labels charge 70% of whatever the gross revenue of the streaming service is. So of your £10, the streaming service has 3 left to work with. Now they're paying for all their infrastructure and bandwidth. So they'd much rather stream you a small file and aggressively cache it on the local client, for example, so to save that bandwidth cost. There's a disincentive for a streaming service to make Redbook or high-res available because they actually become dependent on breakage. If they sell you Sublime Plus and you were allowed to stream 192.24, for example, they would really have their fingers crossed that you didn't stream that very much because they'd be losing money. They could very easily lose money on a single user.
Charge you a lot of money for it. But it is basically what I'm seeing is, with particularly with classical companies, which is where my main interest is, classical music, what they're doing is they're adopting the strategy that the movie companies had, which is windowing. And so, Chandos, for example, you'll see new release this week, you go to the new release, what are you going to get streaming? They're going to give you 45-second MP3 samples only. It's a new release. Next month, you'll get 1644.1. Month after that, you'll get 2496. So that's kind of, it's not really just the bandwidth, it's there, they're doing it, but it is the strategy of the record company to try and get their initial sales. After all, they've got a cash flow question. They've got to get money to pay for their recording costs for the next batch of releases.
Absolutely. In that example,
just streaming's not going to provide that because the royalty rate per play is so low, and the accounting period, as Tony was saying earlier, you get a check next Christmas.
Tony.
I don't know what to say really because I'm at the sharp end. Our deliverables these days to record companies are 96K 24 file set and a 44K 16 DDP, which will go off to a CD factory if they're making CDs, which still sell. Artists can flog them at concerts when they go on tours, they sell. And also the business model of some of the labels now is uniquely a break-even. They're not running like Chandos. Chandos is a private limited company and it's funded by shareholders, and it tries to make enough profit to stay in business. But some of the other labels, particularly the orchestras, they're mainly making the recordings to maintain their profile and to promote tours and things like that. And it does make a difference. We did a job 3 months ago for a pianist who's a DG artist. She lives in New York and also in Seoul because she's Korean. And her agency said, well, you're about to do a Chinese tour. We think you need some proper video. You've got some stuff that people have shot on an iPhone, and that's all very lovely, but we need something grander. So she flew to London for the day. We took Henry Woodhall, got a Steinway, 3 cameras, and made nice videos. They're on YouTube, and her concerts were all sellouts in China. And she talked to several of them saying, why have you come? You've never heard of me. I'm Korean and I live in New York. And they said, well, we saw you on YouTube. So one issue about high-res audio is that really it needs to be associated with pictures more now in terms of artists that want to promote themselves and maintain their profiles. And none of the video formats do 96K. Even if you buy a posh new Sony 4K camera for 10,000, 20, 30,000 pounds, it's got up to 8 channels of 48/24 on it. And I talked to Sony when they launched these cameras. There was a big do at Pinewood. I said, well, why is the audio all 48K? And they said, well, that's the standard. The broadcasters don't want anything else. The cinemas don't want anything else, so they don't bother with it. I don't think they even record any 96K when they're recording the dialogue or the music or anything. But that's my only experiences from my end of the chain. We've experimented with doing 192, and it does sound very nice. But the only one, as Rafi will confirm, we did 192K of some Beethoven string quartets, and it sold 3 copies in 4 years. And now that's not viable. It's not worth the server space. Sounding like an accountant, but I can understand why a record company would be reluctant to make 192K downloads available. And there's not very many 192K A to D converters around that are any good. I've got my old dCSs that I bought a very long time ago, and they still sound lovely. But if we're not we're not recording 192K and we're not mixing it and we're not editing it, you're not going to get any. And in the end, the music business is what dominates. We're not selling audio, we're selling artists and repertoire. And if the sales aren't there, you're not going to get 192K unless you want some obscure orchestra being funded by some guy who's obsessive about 192K. But if you want a major artist, you're not going to find them in that format.
So at what point do you start calling it high res?
Anything better than CD, really. Although it's slipped down to CD now, 44K 16, and it's a tough wall. If you're on my side of the wall, I had a run-in with Apple 2 years ago because we've been doing a cycle of Mozart piano concertos with Neville Mariner and the Academy and a pianist. I better not say who because it reveals too much. I was instructed by the record company that it had to be mastered for iTunes, MFIT, because that was a marketing tool that enabled them to sell more copies on the iTunes store. And I'm not an MFIT approved engineer. I could be if I signed up to what they agreed to. Instead, I went to some friends of mine in Boston called Soundmirror, and I sent them a 96K file set, and they did the MFIT treatment on it and sent it back to me. And when I did a very simple THD plus N distortion of it, it was 15% distortion. That's what you're getting with standard packing. And I don't really want to have much to do with any of that. And the sooner people move back to 4416 will be a step in the right direction. 96 is certainly viable for classical because nearly everybody records it that way.
What do you think of MQA?
I have signed an NDA, and I'm not over enthusiastic. I'm not a great fan of the apodizing filter. I think a lot of sound quality of digital audio gets the blame because of horrible filters at the beginning and the end of the audio chain. And if you've got a 20 dB per octave filter at 21 kilohertz or whatever, it's going to make everything sound dead as mutton.
Paul, we're just talking about the general direction of the future of music. Is it going to be high res or CD quality or still compressed?
I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, and we could go down each avenue for a while. But so looking at it from the Spiritland perspective, so we have a DJ here every night, plays from 6 until late and all day at weekends. And we send an email out to everyone saying, don't bring any form of compressed music. You can play vinyl, CD, quarter inch. You can bring a USB. We play FLACs on our CD players. Depending on how noisy the room is, it's rare that you would be able to hear the difference. During the daytime we play a lot off the Tascam high res player, which is running to the Vivaldi underneath it. I mean, the starting point for this whole project was we wanted to hear music in the best possible quality and re-engage with the emotions within the music. So, this system is a one-off. It was built by Living Voice, Kevin Scott, who I guess a few of you know. We're constantly changing amps and valves, and it's a journey to as far as we can go in high-res world. I think for me, a lot of this, again, is about the delivery, and that's where companies like Apple, when they make it really easy, you buy it. When iTunes say, here's the films, $3.99, press the button, and you're off. If Tidal offered a £30 a month high-res, super high-res option, I'd also be happy, even if the labels, if ECM said we're going to do a £300 a year access to the entire catalogue in high-res, I'd sign up tomorrow. So they need to make it easy for you, really, because I hear about an album, I'll read about it, then you go to HD tracks. First of all, it's pretty expensive. £20 and up for an album, I think, is quite brutal for a download. But also, I'd be happy to add it as a source in my Roon or in my Sonos system. So yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to hear it. I feel like there's very few people who have the ears and the equipment, and probably most of them are in this room now, to be able to tell the difference between a 96 and a 192. And even then, it's only on certain pieces and how they were recorded. We also, musically, we play here. Our DJs play jazz, soul, country, reggae, folk, pop, indie rock, deep electronic dance music. Some of those genres, you can't play Steely Dan all day. There's reggae tunes which sound like they were recorded with a potato. The recording quality is awful, but they're fantastic. And all of your sort of obsessions with bitrate fall away. Now, if we were to do a Sunday night here and each of you bought a piece of classical music and we did a deep listening experience, that's where it happens, and that's where suddenly the differences start coming out. So I'm open to it, and this is a place where we can tinker around with it, but we're in esoteric territory, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, from the DCS perspective, we call it an arms race, because a lot of companies that have technology, that they buy in rather than design themselves, it's all about chasing that next bit rate because they don't have anything else to sell. Now, that's part of the reason why we've tried to equip Paul with a system here, is that the technology existed 25 years ago to do high res. It's always existed. We could go up to 384 if we wanted, but it's really about trying to get that critical mass and getting more people appreciating, good music and a good user experience. And when we get that, then people are prepared to pay for quality, but they need to know that quality exists. So that's the reason why we're looking at partnerships and collaborations like this one.